Alrighty, so joining me on the call today, I'm super excited. We've got Andrew, Damien, and Rick, and the topic today is the Engineering Profit Accelerator. How $5 to $50 million industrial businesses can unlock hidden margins and scale smarter. So what I might do is, with that topic in mind, we might go around the screen and introduce each one of us, and then maybe talk to the topic. So I'm going to start in alphabetical order. Andrew, being A, you're first.
Thanks, David. Andrew Schwartz is my name. I'm an accountant and I run a business called AS Advisory. We specialise in corporate restructuring, forensic accounting and business advisory. I've got 30 plus years experience in helping business owners deal with challenges and issues, and growth is one of those challenges and issues. And so today, with the topic, I'm going to paint the negative side of growth and talk about the key risks to growth and some KPIs that you can monitor to try and avoid those risks.
Really, when we talk about the industrial sector and we're talking about engineering firms in industrial, where are the hidden margins, Andrew? Where would you see them? Like being a forensic accountant, you've seen all the things that go pear-shaped.
Yes.
What are people looking for before they go pear-shaped? So what are the telltale signs?
So the four main areas that I see where people get into trouble is lack of management, poor management, lack of financial controls, lack of strategy, and lack of risk. And those things all relate to in an industrial context, particularly because you've got a lot of moving parts in industrial. You've got production, operations, sales. And there's a lot of key drivers within each of those areas that one needs to be across, or things can go pear-shaped pretty quickly.
Yeah, awesome. Look, I'm going to run around the other guys, find out where they're at, and then we're going to go into the weeds. So let's start with you, Damien, next. Bit of an intro and how you would approach this topic.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, David. So my name's Damien Lacey. I'm the founder of OE Partners. So OE stands for Operational Excellence. Mechanical engineering by trade. Spent a lot of years working in the automotive industry, in particular, a number of years with Toyota Motor Corporation, including a few years in Japan, getting brainwashed, driving cost out of products, cost out of processes. And so, we predominantly help Australian SMEs grow. So, and more often than not, it's their operations, it's their supply chain that's holding that growth back. So we help them look at their processes, look at their systems, look at their teams, and help enable that.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about us, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll move to Rick and then we'll get into the discussion. So Rick, maybe do a quick intro for yourself.
Thanks, David. I'm sure you've all felt that we're so heavily involved in our own business that it's impacting it. And the principle that drives inside our group, my business, is the more valuable an owner is to the business, the less valuable the business is. And we really look at how can a clear marketing strategy and tactics delivered effectively internally to clients and then to new business drive a growth change in the client and really separate out the owner of the business from being the primary rainmaker. And that's really what we see across most of the engineering firms that we work with. Or the industrial businesses we work with. It's the owner is so heavily involved in day-to-day, both the project, but really key client relationships, that growth is held back because there aren't enough people in the business who want to step into that function. And we look at how marketing can be leveraged to create growth drivers in your business and change that paradigm.
Fantastic. And just to sort of, cap it off, David Guest, my name, those who have met me before. We specialize in building self-managed teams. And I think one of the hidden margins or the areas that are missing for a lot of industrial businesses in Australia is that the efficiency and cost of delivery in Australia is far greater in terms of hourly rates because of the economy and the way it stands. And for us, it's always about how do we get our team to be more efficient, or how do we get them to take on more ownership of their role so that we don't have to have this management overhead above them. And so I think we're moving into a stage or into an age now where, AI has now been introduced to business, and I think it's a bit of a game changer. But I think what's still lacking is visionaries in business who actually see how these technologies can be adopted and how we can become more efficient. Now, we're seeing what America is doing with the tariffs at the moment, and I guess that's causing people to rethink whether they should offshore everything, right? And potentially start bringing some sort of industry back into the country. But I guess for that to happen, we need to be profitable. And today's conversation is really about, we've got 4 viewpoints of how someone who's running an engineering firm can become more profitable. Let's take a bit of a deep dive, because we've talked about unlocking hidden margins and scaling smarter. And I'd like to get a bit of insight from each of you how you would approach that. So maybe just to be in random, we'll go with Damien first. So let's talk about
thank you.
margins and scaling smarter. How would you approach that with an engineering firm?
Yeah, so this is a very, very common scenario for our clients, and that's generally the point at which we get involved. They've got a great team, great delivery record. They've got orders banking up, but they're unable to sort of break beyond a certain threshold of revenue, or they have gone beyond a certain threshold. Let's say they were at 15 and then they're now at 25, but then actually the profitability has suffered and they've decided consciously to wind it back. So why has that happened? Generally, the clients that we talk to, it comes down to their operations, it comes down to their supply chain. They take on more work than they can efficiently handle because they're heavily dependent on experienced operators. People kind of just know how to do the job. They add people to that scenario, and those new people don't know how to do the job. And so, generally speaking, it's understanding, what systems and processes need to be fixed and improved and put in place. But at the same time, you can't fix everything all at once. It needs to be done in a focused way, in a staged, step-by-step way. And so how do you get clarity on where do you start? And so generally for us, the first step we take with clients is to get that big picture view of their business, the end-to-end map and flow. The tool we use is value stream mapping, and that really pinpoints, okay, these are your constraints in your business, backed with data. And then, from that, you've got some clarity on the problem, and yourself, you're halfway there if you've got clarity on the problem. So that's generally a good first place to start for those kinds of businesses.
Got it. So you guys really looking at the workflow of the business from go to woe, and saying,
that's right,
let's put it all out and work out where the constraints are. Because I guess the theory of constraints states that you can only grow as strong as your weakest link. And if people aren't willing to look at those links and fix those, then that becomes the thing that stops them from scaling. So really a system solution, I guess, to this whole idea of unlocking those hidden margins. Yeah.
Yeah, and just one follow-on point to that, and maybe I can hear the echo of your viewers, thoughts in their head that, hang on, my business isn't a stable flow. It's not the same every day. I can't go out and map it out and have it be the same situation next week, next month. So it can very much feel like it's chaotic. The requirements of the job change all the time. You can get a certain level of process level, system level understanding, even if it does feel like it changes every day. There definitely are many examples of how you can overcome that hurdle.
So really, like, even though people say I'm different, or our days aren't the same, that's really just an excuse not to get into the weeds and start sorting out where the inefficiencies are.
Yeah, and it's a conscious choice. Like, do you want to stay with that worldview and that understanding of your business, that it's always different and it's always chaotic? Or do you want to consciously say, no, I got to get some sort of structure around what happens day to day. I got to have some level of a process understanding, and because that's the path forward, like that's the way out. So yeah, starting with that belief that I've got to get some structure and organization to what goes on and move forward from there.
Excellent. And I guess this sort of ties in nicely with what Andrew's going to be sort of alluding to, which is, I'm a big believer that the numbers don't lie in business, and people who ignore the numbers and just go on the hype or the emotion end up in all sorts of strife. So Andrew, do you want to just tune in on this conversation and give us an idea of how you would approach an engineering firm or industrial business that's stuck and trying to unlock hidden margins?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest risks is over trading. They chase growth without getting the foundations right first. So getting back to my four weak points, they lack the management systems and processes to be able to delegate and accurately manage what's going on and quickly lose control. And that leads to a loss of production control, but also a loss of financial control. And that's the big one. So, the revenue starts to grow, but your costs start to explode. You take on more sales reps, you take on more people, you take on more processes and systems, and all these costs lead to added expense. And if you're not monitoring your KPIs and your cash flow closely, you quickly run out of money.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rick, you're really focused on helping people put a marketing structure in place within their business without employing a full marketing team. Can you explain a bit of how you would approach this?
So I'll actually springboard off your comments, David, in terms of an effective team. And we've worked with several industrial and engineering business over the last few years and really looked at what are the common problems and inhibitors of growth. And it actually comes down to quite simply clarity at the first point. So which springs off your comment around how do you get the team engaged. And they're always very clear on what we do. They might be structural engineers or they're manufacturing a specific widget. But the lack of clarity on how we do it, and worst, why we do it, is what we see drives a lack of understanding. So you've ended up with often lots of individual business units or parts of the business that are doing the work they're doing, but they're not actually aligned on the why, on the principle of what we're doing, on the why we're doing it, and then how we're doing it. So our first driver is to look at how we make sure that a brand and a business is clearly articulated, and that articulation is effectively communicated into the team so that people are actually much more aligned on why they're doing what they're doing. And then that how piece is also really critical. If I go to any engineering firm that works in the structural civil space, to use as an example, and you ask, well, what do you do? They're all going to say, we do structural or civil engineering, and we've got amazing attention to detail and focus on our clients. They're table stakes. You're not going to win work unless you have those. But when you dig a little bit deeper, there is actually quite significant different philosophical engineering drivers that help them make the decisions they make. But most often what we see is that none of that is codified. So the founders or the current directors of the business have this belief around how engineering should be managed and thought about, but they're not codifying and training the rest of the team to do that. So we start with the first driver of making sure there's clarity, but the second driver is around building out their IP and then communicating that forward. And once you've got both of those, the third component that then enables, which is really where the growth comes from, is by building better relationships. So the common scenario is that the owner or the current directors of the business own the lion's share of relationships with clients. And they're frustrated, and we get this all the time, they're frustrated that other people aren't picking up the relationships, they're not sending estimates through work, and they're requesting stuff, and they're just waiting for me, the owner, to do the work. And if we can change that dynamic, or when we change that dynamic within the business to go building relationships and talking about beautiful engineering work is everybody's responsibility, and we give them, the rest of the team, the language to do that, it unlocks a few things, which drives to the growth. First of all, it unlocks more work, which is the obvious one. But more importantly, it unlocks an ability to close work more quicker and at higher value, because you're no longer a cost or a line item that is similar. I could get civil from company A or B. I want civil from you because you have this approach and this is how you think about it, and I'm happy to pay a premium to drive that. So they're the first starts that we think about when we're looking at growth drivers from a marketing perspective and how we enable that from the team.
And I'm glad you said exactly all that, because I find most engineering firms that I've had experience with, they are technically brilliant, but their communication is sort of limited. And it works in two ways. You've just talked about the importance of identifying what it is you do, why you do it, how you do it, and communicating effectively with the marketplace. But I think the other side of that coin is finding high caliber team members. And the communication that most engineering firms are using to acquire or to attract high caliber team members is pretty limited, probably equivalent to their marketing materials. And so they're not finding the right people. They're not getting the right people on the bus, or they're not getting the sufficient number of candidates, or the candidates they're getting are just not motivated or driven towards the company's vision. And that comes back to this communication. And I think, like, especially now, because we all know AI is coming along like a tsunami, and it's going to change everything about how we do things. And I believe that the employees that you will need in the future have to be one step above just your general admin and just your general, data entry type people. We're going to need smart people, and they exist, and they're going to be able to do more in a shorter period of time because of that. So I think the messaging about who you are as an organization has a twofold approach. It helps find the right customers, but it also helps find the right team members. I think what Damien touched on is you've got to have efficiency within your business, and it's got to be scalable efficiency. And I know people get sort of bogged down in we're an engineering company, we have to connect A to A, B to B, C to C. But in reality, if you have a third person look at it, you'll see all the waste and the gaps. And I don't think you can afford to be lax on this anymore, because the competition's heating up. We've got this situation where, to bring engineering back to Australia, we need to actually work out how to do it better, because the costs can't justify the existence of it unless we do things differently. And I guess in the end, when we talk about Andrew's view of the world, he's just going to say, the numbers tell me the truth. You can tell me how brilliant you are, how good you are, but the numbers don't correlate with what you're telling me. We have a problem. And so there is plenty of room for these engineering firms to scale, not only just linearly, but exponentially right now. And I think everything's leaning in that direction for the people who innovate. So I'd like to sort of wrap up this call with some key sort of words of wisdom from each of you. If you had to pick one idea that you would suggest an engineering firm looks at for accelerating their profit, what would you suggest it is? And we might start with Andrew this time.
I think you've got to focus on your gross and net margin. Mm-hmm. So you chase growth, but you need to know that that's profitable growth.
Yep, thank you. And Damien, for you?
I knew Andrew was going to talk about numbers, so I've purposely not talked about numbers. Just start to get an end-to-end view of what happens in your business. It's not different every time. There is some sort of order and structure to it. Start there, and that'll be the first up on the journey.
Yeah, so really just mapping out the process. And for
start
you,
to finish.
Yeah, thank you. Start to finish.
The mind's simple. Find one more problem to solve for your clients. And to find that problem, you have to actually have a conversation with them, not about the project you're on, but about what else is going on or what's their next project. And if you can help them solve a problem, which is what all engineers want to do, then you'll only provide more value to them, and then they will only provide you more work.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think the time to do this is now, because we're going through this transition phase where I think these businesses really have to start looking for, how can I do it different? How can I do it better? And how can I scale? And so we're going to do a deep dive into this in the workshop that's upcoming. And I know each one of you is going to do a segment that's going to sort of go into that area of expertise and explain exactly what people need to do. So that's in a few weeks' time, and I'm super excited about that. This video was just a precursor, just to get the topic onto the table and help people understand exactly how we're going to help them. So I really wanted to thank you guys for your time today. And I'm super excited about getting this event off the ground. So thanks again.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, David. Looking forward to it.